Human trafficking is a growing problem in North Carolina and Cumberland County. Lieutenant Bobby Jeffers of the Cumberland County Sheriff's Office provides insight on this epidemic and how law enforcement and other agencies are working to combat it.
What we're talking about is one or two things: sex trafficking, or we're talking about paying off a debt, trafficking for labor. And sex trafficking is basically where someone, through the use of fear, coercion, fraud, is forced into doing sex acts. And sex acts performed by a minor is also human trafficking. The other component of that is where you would see someone that is brought to this country for labor or to perform home duties or what have you. And that is also another form of slavery. A person with unexplained physical injuries or abuse, a person whose movement and activities appear to be closely controlled or monitored by another, a person who works excessive hours but receives little or no compensation, a person who works excessive hours and is fearful of discussing working condition or is unaware that certain unsafe conditions are unlawful, a person who has little or no idea where they are geographically located and is always transported to and from a work site, a person who is fearful of discussing relationships to a person who appears to have physical control of them, a prostituted minor or minor used in commercial sex activities, runaway or homeless youth exploited through survival sex, as I mentioned earlier, an adult engaging in prostitution and other commercial sexual activities, foreign national adult or minor who is not in the possession of identifying documents, or he or she claims to own or declares that someone else holds their identifying documents. And we find that happens a lot with minors in sex trafficking. If they have an ID card, normally the pimp is going to hold on to those documents. And if I can tell you guys a brief story, just to kind of tell you what happens right here in Cumberland County. In one of our hotels, there was a young lady that constantly was riding up and down the elevator, and she told the clerk, "Can't you see what they're having me do?" Because here it is, there's people, they're walking in, they're asking for this specific room number, and the very first thing that they're doing is she's coming down to meet them, take them upstairs. And so this young lady really and truly wanted someone just to make that call to say, "Hey, let me dial 911. This just doesn't appear to be right." And unfortunately, that's what's happening in our community. We've got a lot of stories like that. And the sad part is folks are being recruited from schools, from our local schools. They're being recruited from the fact that this young person has run away. And I need to make sure that you guys understand, it's just not girls, it's guys too. And they've run away from home, and now they're trying to get it figured out. Someone says, "Hey, look, why don't you come and stay with me?" And then they may let them stay a couple of days, and then they tell them, "Hey, look, living here is not free. And you need to do a couple of things for me so that I can let you stay here." And thus, just that simple, they're being trafficked. The Sheriff's Office, along with Fayetteville PD, Spring Lake, Hope Mills, and our local agencies, we're all working together to fight it. And we're fighting in various different ways. We monitor various different social media websites. Not only that, but we will actively go out and try to see if we can find these individuals that are on these websites. We locate them. We may try and we may do some undercover operations. Or in Fayetteville's case, what they'll do is they'll try to locate them and ask them to come in to look at services, to look at alternatives. And that's pretty much what all of us are doing. We're all trying to work together to try to see if we can stop this problem. These are some resources available. We've got seed Communicare, Operation Blessing, the Dream Center, Kelly Twiddell, they work with us. They work with all the local policing agencies to work on the problem. We've got the Safe House in Wilmington. We've got the Operation Inasmuch, Rape Crisis, the Child Advocacy Center, Department of Social Services, Cape Fear Valley Hospital, Womack Medical Center, and Fort Bragg CID. All those organizations have all come together to try to help us combat this problem and to try to provide some form of resources for our victims. The reason why we're seeing an increase, you've got to look at it this way. It is a resource that never ever gets used up. I can sell you X amount of dollars in drugs, and once I've sold it, it's gone. When I sell sex to you, it is a renewable asset. I never ever lose that. I never ever get rid of that. And even speaking with that is when these traffickers get to a point and they feel like a young girl or young guy is maybe burned in the area, what they'll do is they'll go trade that human being for another human being and bring them into an area and start trafficking them. So you will definitely find with human trafficking that these people move the people that they're trafficking around to different areas, different states, different places. And the reason why we have a great military community here, and we've got a lot of folks that are unemployed. So that's what makes this type of business to be very lucrative for these folks here, and it is very lucrative. And again, not just only from there, but we also have agriculture in our community, and with that, we need workers to come till the fields. If you're seeing someone at a residence that has a high amount of traffic, people going in and out, and it always appears to you that there are always people hanging around outside of the residence, or as you see people drive up, they speak with this one male individual, and then they go inside of the residence. And then several minutes later, you see them get back out and get back into their car. Something is going on at that residence, and we want you to call us and to let us know. If you happen to be in the healthcare field and you're seeing that this individual just is not allowed to speak up for themselves when they're going for medical checks or other things like that, that should be a clue to our folks. One thing that we tell our deputies that happen to be responding to a call, when you go speak, if you start to see that this person's not allowed to speak, ask to speak to the residents there inside of the residence to see whether or not if there's any bruising or anything else going on inside of that residence so that we can identify these individuals. It really takes everybody wanting to talk about it. I understand that our society is a little different nowadays, and here's why I say that. I say that because when people tend to have things go on at the next door residence, it's not like when I was coming up that something happened, others got involved. What people do now, if they hear domestic violence, they hear something like that, they turn the television up and they say it's not my problem. And the only thing I will sit down there and say that if you have a situation that ends up turning out to where you've got two rivals, and this house happens to be one of the house that the rival is concerned about, guess what? It's shortly going to become your problem. So why not call? It can be done anonymously. No one will know that you called us, but take the effort in which to do so. And if there's children involved, believe it or not, we've had one case where a young lady was taking dates, and what she would do is lock her children in the bathroom. Okay? I'm telling you guys this to please take the time to call that stuff in, especially when you're noticing things just don't pass, as I like to say, the smell test. If it doesn't pass the smell test, take the time, place the call. Just for public information, the Cumberland County Sheriff's Office is monitoring 609 offenders. And just so that you, the public, knows, The sheriff and the sheriff only has the responsibility of monitoring sex offenders. No other agency in the county can monitor those. So that's our responsibility to do, whether they live in the city or the unincorporated areas of the county. So we monitor them in those locations. Some are being monitored by GPS, and some, what we do is we make unannounced home visits. So if you see us at who you know to be a sex offender, sex offender's residence, doesn't mean they've done anything wrong. We're just required to go by periodically to make sure that they're living there. And should they move, they have 3 days in which to report that move. They have to report it to us to let us know that they're moving and where they're moving to, and to that new location, wherever they're moving to. They have to let them know that they're moving into, whether it's another county in North Carolina or into another state. They're required to make sure that they register. 36% of the traffickers tend to be immediate family members. 27% tend to be boyfriends, with the smaller percentages of 14% being family members, friends of family, 14% being employers, and 9% being strangers. So it's a very small amount of people tend to end up being traffickers. So that is why, again, as we encounter these situations, why it's so important that we look and ask questions of a boyfriend, questions of family members, where in the case of, and I'll use the Shania Davis case, okay? That was immediate family. That would have fallen into that 36% category. And that's why I think that it's super, super, super important for folks to understand why we have to ask the questions in which we ask when we encounter these types of situations. You guys can go to the Cumberland County Sheriff's Office website to find anyone that you think may potentially be a sex offender, to find out, all the sex offenders that live in your area.